We may as well kick this off. So, hi everyone, and welcome to IGEA's EMDG webinar with Playwright Consulting. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the country on which we meet. Today, we come to you from the land of the Komomori saltwater people of the Ugama language region. That applies to both Serge and me because we're currently both based on the Gold Coast, and invite you to think on whose land you are residing on. Sovereignty was never ceded, and the lands always have been and always will be Aboriginal land. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and I extend my welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about the EMDG. Our friends at Austrade have released new information, including grand guidelines and opening dates for the next EMDG round. What exactly is the EMDG? Well, the program provides grants to Australian businesses, small and medium-sized, to market and promote their goods and services globally and undertake export training. Your studio can benefit from matched funding to offset export and travel costs, and that includes, for example, trips to the likes of GDC and Gamescom and so on. We, as an IGEA, have benefited from this program in the past, and well, yeah, it really does come in handy. However, the program has undergone some very substantial changes, including changing to a first-come, first-served process. And that really is brand new. So walking us through the process today is Serge from Playwright Consulting, who has extensive experience in that space. Before I hand over to him, and he can do all of that, just the usual housekeeping. Please mute yourself and turn your video off while Serge is presenting, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions later on. So either unmute yourself or put them in the chat of Zoom and or Discord, and we'll take it from there. But yeah, thank you so much. And Serge, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Jens. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on an EMDG webinar. I know it's the end of the day, so hopefully we can make this, as fun as possible, because the program is going to open up on November 12th, and really there isn't that much time when we consider the conferences that are upcoming. So I want to walk you through everything you need to know, so that way you can go ahead and kind of prepare over the next month and make sure you lodge it on the day. And we'll touch on everything here. So today we're going to walk through the game plan of what you need to do for the next round, round 4 of the EMDG. So basically, like I touched on, I want you to walk away from this webinar knowing exactly how to approach this round. So I'll walk you through step by step of exactly what you need to do. I think you already know what this program's about, so I'll save you a bit of time on this, but basically it's an initiative to help you reduce the financial barriers for you to do all this cool international export activities. Cool. So now we're going to start on touching on, I guess, the changes for this round. Now, there are 3 tiers that we're going to focus on in this webinar. Tier 1, which is your ready to export. This is your beginners. Tier 2, which is expanding in existing markets, so markets in which you already have export sales in. And Tier 3, exporting into new key markets. And we'll touch on all these little points here. So basically, the first thing you really want to understand is which bucket you fall into. So a Tier 1 is a business that has not exported before. You're ready to promote a new product or new service. And basically, your annual turnover has to be, well, in FY24 is when they'll make the assessment. So last financial year, it has to be more than 100,000. And so the only little quirk about this one is that you need to complete a little online test. So the grant amount available to you for this Tier 1 is a maximum of 30,000 for the financial year. And so because this round covers 2 financial years, it's a maximum of 60,000. So 30K in FY26 and 30K in FY27 is the maximum. So for Tier 2, you have to have an annual turnover for FY24 of 500K. And basically what you have to do for Tier 2 is to have a high quality specific plan to market. Now, what's available to you in this tier is up to 50,000 per financial year. So 100K all up over the 2 financial years. Now, Tier 3 covers new key markets. So this is markets in which you don't have existing export sales in, and you need to have an annual turnover from, again, FY24 of at least $1 million. So for this one, you need to have a high quality specific plan like Tier 2, but it needs to be focused on these new key markets. Now, what's available to you is up to 80K per financial year, So 160K over the 2 years. Now, what I should really stress here is that this is a matched funding program. So in order to get, let's say in the tier 3, 80K, you have to spend 160K. So 80K will be covered by the EMDG program and 80K from your own contribution. So part of the process requires you to show that you have the capacity to spend. Now, another thing to note is that you have to apply under an ABN in which there's at least 2 years of activity. And also, again, in the last financial year, you're able to demonstrate the turnover threshold. You can only claim EMDG up to 8 times. So make sure you can kind of keep track of how many you've claimed up to date. And these can be, non-consecutive years, and it could be years where you've applied, but you haven't even claimed anything. So that kind of uses up a life in that sense. So this is the overview. So there's a problem. So now that you've got the basics covered, you've got a valid APN, you've been operating for 2 years, you're confident that you can match the funding that EMDG will give you, and you know which tier you fall into. There is a problem. There's a limited amount of agreements that we offered in round 4. So there's 500 for tier 1, 620 for tier 2, and 650 for tier 3. Now, the issue is that this is a first come, first served basis. And this is across all industries, not just games, right? So basically, when you submit your application, it's timestamped, and that is the order in which it will be assessed by Austrade. So even if you do qualify, if you're not in the right order, you might miss out. So basically, you must be ready to apply on November 12th, as soon as the application window opens at 10 a.m. So that's Eastern daylight, after daylight savings, so Melbourne, Sydney time. So this is the problem that we kind of need to get over the next month. So I really want to prepare you with everything you need to know, so that basically when the window opens, you can just go bang. And this is what we're talking about. This is the solution. So step 1, prepare everything in advance, and we'll get on it. So don't get too excited. We'll touch on that soon. Block out your calendar so no one is going to annoy you during that time at 10 a.m. And this is like what I would do. So you don't have to do this, but put on your competitive gamer hat, and you don't have to be toxic. But basically, what you want to do is, as soon as it opens, you want to enter in everything as fast as you can, and get the submission in. It's important to note that if one little error exists in the application, Austrade can throw it out, because they're not going to come back to you with kind of follow-up queries. They will just move on to the next application in the order. So I guess you can think of it like an exam where you only pass if you finish it 100% before everyone else. And you can also think of it like getting Taylor Swift tickets for you fans watching. Cool. So now we're going to talk about exactly what you need. As far as I understand, IGEA will share this webinar after, so no stress in having to screenshot everything. But if you do need the steps, you can reach out to me after, or the IGEA, and we should get everything to you. So what do we do step by step? Step 1, preparation. So understand your eligibility, understand which tier you fall under, understand that you have the capacity to spend. Part B, confirm your access. It's good to click on the portal ahead of time. Make sure you can actually access it, because that's how you're going to get into the form. So you don't want to be doing any troubleshooting on the day. ANZ SIC code. So if you already claimed the R&D, you'll find it on the application. Check how many EMDG claims you've previously made. So that'll save you the effort if you've already passed the 8 threshold. Sorry, you've already done 8. So this is the next step. So E, it's for tier 1 only. So if you've never claimed the EMDG, or you're basically getting ready to export, you need to complete a 30-minute test. So there are 10 modules, and you need to go in and get a completion certificate from it. So I don't think it takes that long, as far as I understand, but this all happens inside the EMDG portal. So this is something that you should probably do ASAP if you're a tier 1 applicant. And then step F, like we touched on, block out your calendar. So these steps are pretty easy here. Only tier 1 has to do something of note on this step. Okay, step 2, plan to market. This is the big item. So basically on the Austrade website, the EMDG section, there's a plan to market template available for you. So what you want to do is basically there's some common questions. And so, what export promotional activities are you actually undertaking during the FY26 and FY27 years? So 1 July 2025 next year. So what are your business goals? What are your measures of success for these activities? What's your planned expenditure that you'll be, what are you going to actually be spending it on? And so basically what you want to do, as I touched on before, if you're a tier 1 applicant, you want to show that you can spend 60K in the year. If you're a tier 2, you want to show you can spend 100K in the year. And if you're a tier 3, you want to show you can spend 160K in the year. Because remember, it's 50% of your contribution and 50% of the match funding. Now, some key differences between the plan to market template. Tier 1 is a little bit easier because there's no requirement for you to show any existing export sales. So basically what I would recommend here is reuse material in that little export test I talked about and kind of just, use that into your plan to market. If you're looking at tier 2, what you really want to do is add depth to your existing plan. So any existing plan to market that you've previously submitted, you want to now add layers of depth to it because you want to basically show how you can enhance your market presence in these markets. And if you're going for the tier 3, you need to show a strategic shift in marketing. So basically you want to reorientate your existing activities and show how they can penetrate new key markets. So that's the strategy around this template. So we're going to continue on the same template. So your export history, tier 1, you don't have to show anything. Tier 2 and tier 3, you do have to show past export activities. And basically, that's just your expenses, that's your, your sales, and just some comments around how you've performed previously. So some little tips about your plan to market. Definitely aim for the max amount. So the reason they've really capped this program at set agreements is because they want to give you the maximum amount. And so basically, if you're not applying for the maximum amount, then there's no way to kind of negotiate that later, but you can always claim less. So it's definitely best to go for that. Again, tier 1, focus on your export readiness. Tier 2, focus on, this depth, increasing market share in existing markets, brand visibility, and deeper engagement in the markets you're already in. And for tier 3, really emphasize why you're strategically shifting. Regardless of the tiers, make sure you kind of avoid generic answers. They're getting smarter internally around assessing these. So you definitely want to show a little bit of uniqueness and strategy. So that's your plan to market. Now you want to do the application form. So this is also another template that's available from the Austrade website. It's not the plan to market. There'll be 2 main templates. The other one will be the application form, which we're talking about here. And so there's nothing really special in that application form. It's, your traditional form, what's your address, what's your ABN, what's your industry, etc. So if you filled out forms before for your business, you should be pretty comfortable with that one. Some attachments that you'll need are your P&L statements for the last 2 financial years, FY23, FY24, your balance sheets at 30 June 23 and 30 June 24. And you need to show tax compliance. So, because FY24 tax return is not due yet, that's not the one you need to show. So you don't need to rush and panic and submit that. You can show your FY22, FY23 notice of assessment, for example, and some BAS statements. You just need to make sure that you just evidence to demonstrate that you're on top of things. From a tax side, bank statement. So this is a snapshot of your current bank, just to show that you have at least the funding to match it. Trust deed, if you operate as a trust, optional. Evidence that your product or service originated from Australia. So that could be, legal docs, IP documentation, invoices showing, it's coming from staff or contractors in Australia. And some specific tier attachments you need. So again, tier 1, reiterating that you need that export readiness test that comes through the Austrade portal. For tier 2 and tier 3, you need to show 2 export sales from the last 2 years and 1 from the last 18 months. So pretty straightforward attachments. It's really the plan to market, the step 2, which is where your focus should be. Okay, and lodgement day. I can't stress this enough. You really should be on top of it at 10 a.m. Don't delay at all. You can't pre-populate the form, unfortunately. That was one of the biggest questions that was sort of put back to Austrade. Unfortunately, what you will need to do is from that plan to market template and application template, you'll need to just copy over your answers and then attach sort of everything else. But once you've submitted, you can sit back. Cool. So what I've done over the next 5 slides is I'm going to try and speed run through all the frequently asked questions. So this is an aggregation of kind of all the little quirky bits about the program. These are all the bits that were asked back to Austrade during those webinars that were hosted a few weeks ago. I really just wanted to just aggregate everything, and hopefully this will cover most of the questions you might have about this round. Because I guess the worry would be that Austrade eventually are going to become a bit overwhelmed closer to the deadline. So I want to make sure that any basic things you need, you could probably refer to this first and then follow up with Austrade or EMDG Consultant if you need. So some of these are basic, some of these are a little bit more tricky, but hopefully they will answer most of your questions. So for turnover, as I mentioned, it's based on your FY24 results, right? So that 100K, 500K, 1 mil threshold. And of course, you need to be under 20 mil across all tiers. So you really need to show that. You can't consolidate turnover from international subsidiaries or associated companies. It's on the specific ABN in which you're registering that has to have the turnover. Tax returns requirement, as we touched on, just proof of tax compliance. Use the FY22, FY23 notice of assessment to show that. For groups with kind of multiple ABNs, basically you can submit separate EMDG applications for different ABNs, but they will know if it's for the same thing. So I don't recommend that. But if you've got, in your group, you've got 2 different companies with different ABNs with different export purposes, then you can submit 2 different EMDG applications. That's totally fine. But again, you don't want to mess around with doing an EMDG application for pretty much similar export activities. Yep, so that's the next point there. And so there are so this next point, this procedural fairness and reviewable decisions, that was raised because one of the questions in the webinar was around kind of like, oh, if you dismiss our application, what rights do we have as the applicant? So there are some rules around you being able to kind of fight back, but basically it's not a strategy you should be relying on. They can review the decision, but again, it will come so many weeks kind of after this entire process. It's best to just get your application in as accurately as possible. And so the next point is concept of export. So basically, it's just simply having a presence in a market. And then for tier 2 and tier 3, it's kind of around sales. So that's what the next definition comes into play, new market. So a new market is defined as having no prior export sales in. So if you, have a random dollar that you receive from the US now becomes not a new market, it's an existing market. So just kind of be conscious about that. So that would, if you received $1 from some random person in the US is no longer a new market for tier 3 purposes. So just be conscious of that. Okay, so here's some more points. So the duration for each tier that you can apply for is up to 2 years for tier 1, up to 4 years for tier 2, and up to 4 years for tier 3. So for example, this round, you can only do 2 years worth of applications. So if you do 2 years in tier 2, and then for the next round that comes out in a couple of years, you can do another 2 years in tier 2. So just be conscious again of kind of how many EMDG claims have you done and how many have you done in each respective tier. You can do a single year application. So, if you think you're only going to be doing some export activities in FY26 and nothing in FY27, you can just do for 1 year. My recommendation would still be, pick the maximum amount and cover it over the 2 years also, because I guess you never know. Selecting a tier. So you can only apply for one tier. You can't mix and match. You can't do 1 year for tier 2, 1 year for tier 3 in this round. Again, it has to be an entirely separate round. So pick a tier that suits your business strategy the best. And in the future, for FY28, for FY29 going forward, you can go back from tier 3 to tier 2. Again, it goes around what's your strategy, new markets, existing markets. So for markets in tier 3, if you select multiple new key markets, and I'll touch on it in a coming slide, and this will make a lot more sense. But so if you say, you have no export sales in the US and no export sales in Germany, and you say you are going for tier 3 and you're going to attack Germany and US from an export activity perspective, and then the year comes around and you only you're only doing activities in the US, that's okay. You just need to only show, you only need to do one. So they're not going to hold you against not spending in Germany. As long as you meet the thresholds, the minimum thresholds and requirements, you're okay. That's that 20,000 minimum we touched on earlier. So the difference between marketing and promotional activities. So you might see this different wording in the guidelines. Basically, the same thing for the purposes of EMDG. New market expenses. Tier 2 is for expanding market activities. And I really want to reiterate again, tier 3 is for new markets. So you can't claim expenses in existing markets under tier 3. And we have an example coming up, so no stress. So for tier 3, the big thing is showing strategic shift. So strategic shift involves changing business strategy to enter new export markets. This can include operational readiness, supply chain adjustments, and new marketing promotional activities aimed at the new market. So they really want to show that pivot. You really want to show that pivot in your plan to market. And just some other points here. GST does not apply to EMDG, and in terms of the claim amount and bank statements, you need to provide a current bank statement at the time of application to show that you have the minimum spend capacity of 20,000. Cool. So here's the little example. So, just say Japan, US, and Germany are on your radar for export activities. So in the second column here for export sales, let's say you're for FY24, you had 100K sales from Japan, 0 sales from the US, 50K sales from Germany. And in terms of so the third column is kind of your spend for your planned spend for FY26. So for the first round, for the first financial year of the round 4 EMDG. So basically Japan and Germany here are your existing markets. So if you want to make an EMDG claim for FY26, FY27, you can only claim Japan and Germany if you apply for tier 2 because they're your existing markets. And on the flip side, you can only claim expenses in the US if you're going for tier 3. So this is the big decision that you need to make when you do your application. Am I more likely to get the maximum grant amount in tier 3 because I'm spending in a new market with no export sales, or am I going to do it by deepening my market in an existing country? So this is the big decision you need to make. So the biggest thing you need to know is deadline day. So that's the biggest thing. And the second thing is what tier. So they have a number of countries under their tier 3 new key markets. You just need to make sure you can target one of these and get the spend threshold in these countries. So I'm not going to read them all out. You can refer back to this, and it's also on the EMDG website. It covers most of the countries. The things that came up that they didn't cover was, I think, Scandinavia, like your Norway, and some other countries in Europe like Spain, which I think was another big one. And then there are some other countries like Mexico and whatnot, but it has most of the big ones. So for tier 3, also consider if the country of your focus is in this list. Cool. So let's touch on a little bit of the expenses. So you can't claim business class. You can only claim the equivalent economy airfare. So basically, let's say, when it comes to the actual, preparation of this, you have to show the estimate expenditure. You would need to show an equivalent economy airfare. So for example, you're going to Gamescom next year, that'd probably be the first thing you're going to put down for this round 4 EMDG application, the Gamescom convention next year. And so you would need to show like, hey, flights to Berlin and flights to Cologne and back are 2,000, something like that. So if you are going business class, you can't claim that difference. And so the second biggest cost of notice is this 350 per day allowance per person per trip. So the per trip is capped at 21 days, and you can have multiple of these 21 days across the year. So, as long as, of course, it's related to the promotional activities. And again, it's $350 per day per person, up to 21 days per trip. So there's a lot of per that you need to consider. If there's any confusion, feel free to reach out around that one. So those two are kind of what will make up most of your, I guess, forecast planning. And then it will be all the stuff like the trade shows, the representatives, the consultants, So you just have a deep think about all those other costs. So application timing and order. Applications are time-stamped and assessed in the order received. Again, just reiterating that. And then once funds run out, even if you qualify, that's it. The next round will take place in 2 years. So kind of if you miss this window, we might have another conversation this time in 2 years' time. So this is a really, really important window for your business to take note of. Annual turnover is calculated again on the preceding financial year, which is FY24. So if you think if you're 950,000 for FY24 and you're confident that you're going to grow next year, unfortunately, you won't meet the threshold for tier 3. So you'll be in tier 2 for that one. So in terms of the process, you'll be notified of the agreement early 2025 if you're accepted. So you're kind of waiting for a couple months after submitting in November. There is some room to actually receive some of the payment upfront if you are approved. So you'll receive it, a portion. Let's say you're going for 30K. You're expecting 30K, you might receive 10 or 15,000 kind of upfront before you actually spend. So they're pretty flexible and they're pretty good like that. But again, the challenge is actually getting approved in the first place. And just some final points. Like we touched on. So they'll assess it over the 2 months after you submit in November. You'll know by late January. You have 21 days to accept the offer, and then payments will begin from July 2025. Spending requirements, again, just reiterating kind of the same things. You must show that you have the capacity to match 50% of kind of what you're going for. Industry averages. Austrade also looks at basically industry averages related to export sales amounts when assessing tier 2 and tier 3. I don't know how strong they'll enforce this. It's kind of part of the internal benchmarking. But for instance, if you've submitted, and they see your export sales numbers a little bit strange compared to kind of the industry average, they might, they have the right essentially to not qualify the application. This was something that just sits in the guidelines, so I just thought I would just raise it. But I think you'll be okay. Application forms, so the templates and the questions, they're pretty much the same as what's going to appear in the online form. They did mention that the order of the questions might be different from the templates and the online form, but basically there shouldn't be any surprise questions coming up. And if you have any issues getting onto the EMDG portal, my recommendation would be just try logging in, over the next couple of days. And if you have any issues, contact the ATO because that's not an Austrade issue. Cool. Need help? Yeah, contact Austrade for any EMDG questions as quickly as you can. They don't have to respond, but they've been pretty good responding. So I'm just conscious that as you get closer to the lodgement window, your chances of a reply will decrease. And then reach out to your existing EMDG consultants. Myself personally, I'll prepare preparation and review services, but I can't offer lodgement day services because I mean, who would I submit for first? I don't know. So that definitely should be on the studio doing that. And now question time.
Yeah, thank you so much for that overview. We do indeed have a couple of questions in the chat. Maybe some of them have already been answered. Let's go through them nevertheless. Simon is asking, does annual turnover include government grants?
Yes. For turnover purposes, it does. Yes.
I guess one thing to keep in mind as well is that you cannot double dip when it comes to this. So when the government, for example, by a travel grant pays for your trip to Gamescom, you cannot claim that on the EMDG. So just be mindful of that. They don't like double dipping. And well, I guess I can see why. Simon is also asking, what format are they expecting for the profit and loss statement? Is it, for example, an export from Zero?
Yes, that is a very good question. Ideally, it's coming from, your accountant. So that's the best outcome. But there might be some leeways just due to the quick turnaround.
Yeah, and I guess the size of the business as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Simon, again, also very good questions. Regarding the 21-day trips, does this mean that you need to return to Australia between trips? For example, if you have a non-business holiday between events, you may go to Gamescom in Germany and then you go to PAX in the US the next month. Would that count as multiple trips?
Yeah, so they're separate trips. So each trip is 21 days. So, if you've gone somewhere, that's one trip. And then if you've gone somewhere else, that's another trip.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't think you need to come back to Australia to then go to the US. I mean, ultimately, it is a separate trip that is still business related. So, and I can see why you want to fly to the US from Germany, given the shorter distance. Blake is asking, to maximize grant returns, can you submit 8 times 1 year submission that puts the full grant maximum return into each 1 year application?
So you can only make one, if I understand this correctly, you can only make one application per ABN for this round. And so the best outcome will just be submitting for 2 years.
All right, Blake, if that doesn't answer your question, just put it in the chat or feel also free to unmute yourself and explain it in case I misinterpreted your question. In the meantime, Meredith has a really good question. Oh, Blake, do you want to? There he is. Excellent. All right, no, let's stick with Blake.
Give it to me, Blake.
Can you put in a 1 year application instead of a 2 year application this year, and then come back next year and do another 1 year application?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problems. You have to submit for FY26 and FY27 now.
That's right. Meredith has a really good question. That's something that came to mind as well. Same with the question that Jason is asking further down below. If you have a publisher or investor and they're managing distribution, for example, does that mean it's counted as an export in every region they're distributing to, or is the export only the region of payment currency coming in? For example, the publisher is in the US, but have taken payments from China, but you're only receiving export income from the US technically.
Yeah, so this will come down to kind of how it's declared by you, from what region the export sales actually come from, and you're going to have to show invoices. They can ask for invoices. So it'd be kind of around how you record it and what's your evidence around that.
Yeah, because it sort of ties into the Jason question. I joined late, but I think it may have been covered. Most game devs will have markets when distributing on the App Store. So that by nature, we have sales in most markets, right? Like it also somewhat demonstrates the analog nature of the EMDG. Like you don't accidentally export machinery or, I don't know, potatoes into a country, whereas with games, I don't know, even North Korea, someone could be like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm going to try that. And then, you have an export, right? Games are born global by default. They are available everywhere. And so, yeah, Jason, as you pointed out, is there a strict limit here? When it comes
Yeah.
to tier 3, that we have 0 sales in a given market? Is there a threshold? Like, it's how does that work?
Yeah, for tier 3, I think it's going to better suit service providers rather than actually actual game developers because, by nature, we're global, so we kind of hit every market.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So something to keep in mind, because yeah, that is where it is getting a bit tricky. And again, it goes to show that I guess digital exports, the digital sale, weightless exports, as we like to call them, weren't probably really part of the consideration of this, and a bit more agricultural, if that's the right word. And Simon is also commenting here on Meredith's remark regarding publishers. I would expect this to count as exporting that market since platforms have related regional taxes, which Steam handles for you. So there you go. It's getting even more into the weeds.
Yeah, that's a very hard question to answer. I mean, even for Austrade to even assess, they're going to just want to look at, what substantiation you have around the export sales and why you declared it in that particular market.
Yeah, fair enough. Claire is asking, with the 21-day travel stipulation, can you return to the same country and claim another 21 days? Is it 21 days per country overall?
Yeah, so it's per trip. So, it doesn't restrict you to a particular country. If you're, for example, going to Germany for Gamescom and then 6 months later you're going back to Germany, it's, a separate trip. So I would consider a trip consecutive days in which you're doing the export promotional activities.
Yeah, and I guess, for the want of a better term, common sense would probably apply here as well. Is there, for example, a conference happening in Germany that you're gonna return for, or, is there an obvious reasons as to why you're coming back, and that you can construe the trip around, as opposed to just sort of randomly traveling, be like, oh yeah, we're exporting.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just checking if I missed any questions or comments. Yeah, Meredith and Simon are still having a conversation. If you're being paid by the publisher specifically, this is the part I'm stuck on. All the invoices from publishers are likely to just have a breakdown, but some of the platforms themselves often break it down into market/region, which developers won't always have access to anyway, depending on the publisher, because they're handling that for you. So if the answer is how you report, that's a tricky one, and we don't want to accidentally do the wrong thing. Is the responsibility to source the regional breakdowns and spend, or are you just supplying what you've been provided? That is considered income. Tricky, indeed.
Definitely tricky. It'll come down to how you report it and what evidence you have.
Yeah, all right. So I guess it also then depends on the data you have access to and how, for example, Steam can provide that to you. So yeah, again, it just goes to show the digital nature, some are clashing with the sometimes analog considerations that went into this. Do we have any more questions? So again, checking here if we missed anything. All right, so still discussing here about backends and reporting and so on. So look, but I mean, this is also where Serge can help you, in terms of his reviewing of your plan. It's definitely worth getting some help. IGEA, until recently, also had an EMDG consultant that helped us to get this over the line. We will be using Serge this time around to help us with the new format of first come, first serve. And dare I say, getting on someone on board to help you is really worth it to navigate the sometimes evidently very tricky nature of this beast.
Yeah, feel free to just flick me questions, either just even if you don't want to be engaged, just you know, a couple questions here or there, happy to answer, no stress. I just want the games industry to win, and we want to make sure all of you guys are submitting at 10 a.m.
Yeah, gotta get you to the starting line and
Yeah.
get you up and running right away. Because yeah, I mean that is really the major change. In the past, you submitted it and they considered it upon the merit of the application, which is still done this time around. You just have to be really fast this time around as well. So it pays to be prepared in advance. Yeah, and I'm just seeing here another comment about the access to console financials. So yeah, there you go. Look, I guess ultimately there's only so much that you can do in that respect. And as mentioned before, tier 3 is primarily for service providers. So there may be an opportunity to sort of circumvent that. So make that part of your considerations as well. Wait, is that's a fair thing to say, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the other little tip here is they're very big on the Asian markets. So if you kind of are considering one, definitely hype it up, because they definitely falls under Austrade's 2040 or 2050 vision. I forget. It's one of those years. They're wider vision. So definitely include an Asian country if you can.
Yeah. Also a good example of how some of these things are politically shaped, in terms of how there's sort of political agenda setting at play here, which, I mean, fair enough, Asia being the neighboring regions and some of the world's largest markets. So you can sort of see where they're coming from there. To put this into perspective, last year, IGEA had a roundtable with Assistant Foreign Minister Tim Watts about Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. And Minister Watts opened that meeting with a powerful statement around the fact that Indonesia, with its 288 million people, attracts less investment than New Zealand with its 5 million people from Australia. So I can sort of see why they may want to facilitate that, even though I can then also appreciate that for game developers, it's not always easy to enter those markets, given that they're sometimes a bit of a black box. But, we are working on that, at least in the case of Indonesia. And of course, I always have to take your feedback on board. If there's anything that you want to know more about, we can then liaise with the likes of Austrade in those markets, as well as our connections in other game developers associations. All right, will the recording be shared? Yes, no worries at all. We are recording it right now. So that's all good. We'll put that on our website. And Serge, if you are okay with it, we can also share your slides.
Yeah, of course.
Excellent. All right. Any more questions, comments, worries? Look, Serge is also going to be at Melbourne International Games Week and South by Southwest. The aforementioned road trip plays part in it. So hopefully it's a safe trip. But yeah, so you can catch him there as well. So hit him up on Meet to Match or whatever platform South by Southwest uses, or when you see him at lunch, strike up a conversation. He's, of course, happy to help. Other than that, thank you so much for your time and your excellent questions. And of course, Serge, thank you so much for the excellent presentation, in particular, all the effort that went into the FAQs. As someone who sat in on a Austrade webinar on exactly these things, I can absolutely appreciate the effort that went into that and the patience and so on. So that was really well done. Thank you so much. And other than that, well, everyone, thanks for dialing in, and I hope to see all of you at Melbourne International Games Week and GCAP. So I guess until then, take care. And
thanks, everyone.
All right. See you later. Bye.